Namaste, my dear brothers and sisters. The love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you from Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch. Our topic today is back pain and neck pain. These are some of the commonest problems which most of us face. There's hardly anybody who has never experienced neck pain or back pain in life. And yet, most of the time, at any given point in time, most of us are free from back pain and neck pain, which means that since it is almost universal, it's important to understand this issue. And at the same time, we don't have to worry about it because it is curable, and most of us are free from these problems most of the time. That's the positive part. Now, with this little introduction, let's turn to the PowerPoint. We're going to talk about the back and the neck pain. The title again is The Poor Spine. There's at least two reasons. One is that this rather slim structure has so much to do. It keeps us erect, supports the body, and has to be strong. And at the same time, it has to be flexible so that we can move forwards, backwards, sideways, turn, twist, what all we do with the back and the neck. And at the same time, it also has to house and protect the spinal cord, the delicate structure, which is an extension of the brain, which is so important that if there is an injury, one can get paralyzed. So, to take care of that is also what the spine does. So, the poor spine. On the other hand, when there is pain in the back, what all has not been done to it? It has been subjected to exercise, it has been subjected to rest, it has been subjected to heat and to cold and to radiation, and all with logic, and also submitted to extensive surgery. Now, why do we have pain at all? A spiritual way of looking at it is that it is the hand of nature sculpting men to greatness. An inspired labor chisels with heavenly cruelty an unwilling mold. Now, these are a few lines from Sri Aurobindo Savitri. Uh, Man by himself, left to himself, is not much interested in improvement. He would much rather stay as he is and be as everybody else is. And that's our comfort zone. To pull us out of that comfort zone and inspire us to something greater, higher, and wider, we need a stimulus. And one of those stimuli is pain. So, pain is an instrument, a chisel that nature uses for sculpting men to greatness, for molding ordinary men into men greater than themselves, to go beyond themselves, to rise to a higher level. And since pain is painful, but then it is administered with good intentions, it has been called heavenly cruelty. So the divine uses this cruelty, this heavenly cruelty, to inspire us to greatness. And this is necessary. This type of painful treatment is necessary because the mold that is being chiseled, is by itself unwilling. So let's start with back pain. Neck pain will be only a small appendage towards the end. And the body is extremely wisely made, and we can see that the spine is not straight. It has these curves, alternating convexities and concavities in the neck. The the neck and the thoracic region, the lumbar region, and finally sacral region, alternating concavities and convexities. And these are helpful in terms of the function that it has to perform. And then, it has these muscles attached at the back as well as in the front, which are a part of the support that the spine gives. So, spine alone is not supporting, it is all these muscles put together which are attached to the spine, which together support the body and help us do whatever we do with the back. This is something which we'll keep turning to again and again because of the importance of the muscles. Because when we talk of back pain, sometimes the tendency is to think only in terms of the bones constituting the back, that is the spinal column or the vertebral column uh, or the backbone. But that is not all that is relevant to the back pain. In fact, the muscles and ligaments are even more important, particularly the muscles. And we can see that not only we have these muscles, if you look at the back, which are directly or indirectly connected to the back, on the back itself, but also in the shoulder, in the arms, in the gluteal region, and in the legs. All these are directly or indirectly connected to the back. And that is true also in the front. If you look at the front, the abdominal muscles are also uh, intimately related to the back. Now, when we lift a load, what is it that we are subjected to? We are subjected to uh, the load or the pressure. That makes all the difference. And to understand that, let's have a look at this picture. If we stand on sand, we leave behind these two uh, depressions in the sand. But if the same person lies down on the sand and gets up, you find that there's hardly any dent made on the sand. The weight is the same, yet we find that the impression left on the sand is much deeper if we stand. Why that happens is because it's not the load that is important, it's the pressure that is exerted on the sand which is important, and the pressure is equal to the load divided by the area. Now, here the area is much smaller, here the area is bigger, and therefore uh, the same load, when it gets distributed over a bigger area, hardly leaves any dent in the sand. Now, what is the relevance of this to the body? This is the, say, behind, and this is the front of the body. We cut the body across. Now, this is the backbone or the spinal column, the vertebral column. Attached to it are these muscles at the back and these muscles in the front, the abdominal muscles. So all this becomes one cylinder. Now, when we carry a weight, when we lift a weight, we find that reflexly these muscles undergo a contraction. They become rigid. And the result is that the load is borne by this entire cylinder, not just by this vertebral column here. It is distributed to the entire area. And that's why the pressure actually exerted is much less than it would be if it had to be all borne by the bone. Now, from this, it follows that if these muscles are weak, or for some reasons, these muscles do not contract. If the entire load has to be borne by this little bit here, the vertebral column, then it will become too much for it and could injure it. So pressure is force divided by the area. So it depends upon whether it's this entire area on which the load is exerted or the force or the load is on just this much. Now, for this area to increase so that this entire cylinder is sharing the load, two things are important. One is that these muscles have to be strong. So, weak muscles are one of the most important reasons for back pain. And then these muscles take a little time to respond, which means that if the load is imposed so suddenly that there was no time for the muscles to respond, again, there could be an injury. And it also means that when we are lifting a load, we should lift it consciously and allow for this time. Lift the weight in such a way that this time is allowed for, is built into the process of lifting the load. That is one of the important things for lifting a load properly. So we find that the spine is a marvel of engineering. It provides for flexibility and mobility. It's flexible so that we can be mobile. It is strong and stable. It needs the strength because it has to bear the weight of the body and also give us the capacity to carry a lot more weight. We can lift uh, a lot, pretty heavy baggage. So that strength is required. At same time, we should remain stable. And this is again important because human being is one of those creatures which has an erect posture. So to be stable in that posture is something which again depends upon the strength of the spinal column. And as you can see, that uh, that is greatly helped by the fact that as we go down, the thickness of the vertebral column keeps increasing. So thinnest in the neck and thickest in the lumbar region here in the lower back. And then the structure also has to house or accommodate the spinal cord and also allow space for nerves to leave and to enter so that they can, the nerves which are going to the carrying information to the spinal cord or bringing messages from the spinal cord, they also have to pass through. And those little holes also have to be left behind in this vertebral column for those nerves to pass. It's not just the spinal cord which has to be accommodated, but the nerves issuing from the spinal cord or going to the spinal cord also have to pass through this vertebral column. So these little holes also have to be left. So you can see how much complexity there is in the spine. And uh, the wonderful thing is that it serves us for so many decades, complaining so little. Now, this is how a typical vertebra looks like if we look at it from the top. This is the body. This is the place where one vertebra is joined to the other. And of course, between two adjacent vertebrae, there's a disc here, we'll come to. This is the central sort of hollow space where the spinal cord is accommodated. And these are the spines which we can feel at the back. This is the thoracic spine, one vertebra on top of the other. And between the vertebrae, we find the discs. Now, if you look at the disc a little more carefully, we find that it has a, a sort of tough, fibrous ring. Uh, and at the center of this ring-like structure is a jelly-like mass. So this is tough. It can bend and stretch a little, but the important feature of this is that it has great tensile strength, which means it resists tearing. You can pull it as hard as you like. It will stretch a bit, but will not tear. Whereas this central one, that is what provides the mobility, because soft and jelly-like, that is what provides the mobility to the structure. Now here is a simpler view from the top, the fibrous ring and the gelatinous center. Now the strength of this can be understood in terms of a simple model. Suppose you have these two pieces of wood and between them you have a football bladder, partly inflated football bladder. Now this thin little football bladder filled with just air may look weak, but then if you are able to uh, fix these two pieces of wood in such a way that they remain together and the bladder does not slip out, you can stand on this top slab of wood and the bladder will not burst. It has that much strength. So that is the type of strength that you have over here also. This partly inflated bladder is also soft and can mold like this gelatinous mass, but it is so strong. And the surrounding wood, of course, is strong so that you can even stand on it, or even two people can stand on it, and still you'll find that this does not burst. So the disc is not really delicate. And therefore, when we say, oh, this disc is slipped out, and we feel as if the most delicate part of the vertebral column is the disc. Actually, the disc is the toughest part. It is the bones which are a little weaker. So that if there is an accident and there's severe injury, it's very often that the disc is hardly affected. It is the muscles that tear, the ligaments that tear, and even the vertebrae fracture, but the disc remains intact. The disc is so strong. Now, what all does the disc do? It cushions the load, it's a shock absorber, and spreads the load evenly on the surface of the disc. It also allows for movement of the spine, and if the spine is overloaded, it's more common for the vertebrae to fracture than the disc to rupture. So it's not at all delicate. It's a strong structure, and yet a structure that allows for flexibility and mobility. So, what is a slip disc? Slip disc is actually a misnomer. The disc does not slip out. What can happen is that as a result of wear and tear and overload, the ring, this tough fibrous ring with great tensile strength, that can give way and the jelly can bulge a little and sometimes make a little tear in this completely and escape out. And it is this distortion of the shape of the disc that then leads to compression of the nerves which are coming and going to the spinal cord from the spinal cord, and the pressure on the nerves causes pain as well as could cause weakness of muscles, could cause various symptoms depending upon what type of nerves and which nerves have been affected. But then this explains why sometimes the problem is in the back, but the pain is felt in the buttocks or the thighs or the leg or the foot. That's because it depends upon which nerves have been compressed or affected by this type of a distortion of the disc. And in the same way, the same thing could happen in the neck. The problem is in the neck, but the pain is felt in the shoulder or the arm. Now let's turn to the muscles, the all important muscles, which create that rigid cylinder which takes the load away from the backbone in a way by distributing it to a wider area so that the pressure uh, on that entire cylinder is much less because of this larger surface area. Now, there are about 140 muscles attached to the spine itself. And in addition, there are abdominal muscles, shoulder muscles, hip and leg muscles, which are directly or indirectly related to the back. And the strength and flexibility and balance of all these is important. These muscles have to be strong, that we can understand. But then they also have to be flexible. And this we understand when the muscles go into a spasm. The muscle is the same, it still has the same strength. It has, in fact, contracted extremely strongly because it was strong. But a muscle which has gone into a spasm is no longer flexible. And that's why we have pain and there's a greater possibility of injury. There also has to be a balance between these muscles because these muscles would include muscles which are working in opposite directions. Some helping us bend forwards and some helping us bend backwards. Now, these would be muscles which are working in opposite directions. Some bending to the right and some bending to the left. Now, these have to be balanced because if there's an imbalance, then again that would distort the spine. Because, say, suppose the muscles which take us backwards, they are stronger than those which take us forwards, then the back will be have a tendency to bend backwards. If those which are help us bend forwards, they are stronger than those which make us go back, then the back will have a tendency to bend forwards all the time. So that can create an imbalance, which will then again uh, tell on the different types of movements which when we perform different types of movements, it could easily lead to pain and injury. So the muscles also have to be balanced. Now this explains why changes in the bone or the discs may be minimal. So if one done an X-ray or uh, a CT scan, one may find that the bones or the discs may hardly show any changes, but the back pain is severe. On the other hand, changes in the bones or the discs may be considerable, but the person may have no back pain. This is because the health of the back seems to depend more on the muscles than on the bones. So Even with minimal changes in the bones or discs, if the muscles are weak and there has been an injury or the muscles have gone into a spasm, then the back pain can be severe. On the other hand, age-related changes in bones or discs may be considerable, but the person may have no back pain at all because the muscles can take care of the load, and therefore these changes in the bone or the discs, which may be age-related, do not really matter. That's because the support provided by the muscles determines to what extent the spine has to bear the load. If the muscles are in good shape, then they share the load and reduce the pressure enormously. The pressure per unit area is reduced enormously if the muscles are strong, if the load is borne by this entire cylinder formed by the back muscles and the abdominal muscles. So the root cause of back pain often is weak muscles, and this leads to an inadequate sharing of the load by these muscles. The load has to be borne much more by the vertebrae in the disc. So overloading of the vertebrae in the discs is what is often the root cause of back pain. Another important cause, again related to the muscles, is spasm. Now, what is spasm? Spasm is a sudden and strong contraction. So you can see these muscles uh, tight and contracted to such an extent that they have compressed the spine. Now, this is a protective response because this vertebral column houses the spinal cord. The spinal cord is an important and delicate structure. And therefore, if there's the slightest threat to the spinal cord, the response is that the back muscles related to the back, go into a spasm. They go into a sudden and tight contraction. The muscles of the back are amongst the most sensitive in the body with this respect. The other muscles don't go into spasm that easily and that often. It is the back muscles which are super sensitive. Any little possibility of an injury, and the muscles go into a spasm. Sometimes hardly any possibility of an injury. It may be just cold and the muscles go into a spasm. So any threat to the spinal cord makes the back muscles contract quickly and strongly. However, muscles in spasm are more prone to injury. You can imagine that if something is stiff, then it can break more easily. Bend it a little bit and it breaks. One analogy to think of is, say, noodles. Uh, Noodles, before they have been cooked, they are stiff, like muscles in spasm. And you just bend them a bit and the noodle breaks. But then if we cook it, it will not break, it just bends. That's like a muscle which has been stretched and nicely, which is relaxed and has been subjected to frequent stretches. That's why the stretches are important. So the muscle which has been used frequently, exercised, and has been stretched, as in the yogic postures, that muscle remains like cooked noodles. And ordinary muscle, which is not in spasm and which has not been so well looked after, is somewhere in between, say half cooked noodles. Now, that brings us to the importance of mental tension because mental tension is often what leads to muscle spasm. So, when the mind is tense, the muscles also become tense. So, it's not just a threat of an injury, a mechanical injury, but mental stress itself can send the muscles into a spasm, and see how mental tension may work. So, mental tension leads to muscle spasm. If a person is tense, the person is also more likely to have accidents. It's when we are under stress, and if we drive, we are likely to have an accident. If we are under stress and we are working in the kitchen, we are likely to hurt our finger. Knife cuts the finger instead of the vegetable. Now, all those accidents are more likely when we are under mental stress. And muscle spasm leads to pain. Now, pain further increases the mental tension. Now, if accidents are more likely, that can also means the accident will lead to a back injury. So chances of back injury increase. Muscle spasm makes the muscles rigid, and a rigid muscle breaks easily. as we saw a few minutes back. So muscle spasm makes the muscle rigid, which can lead to a back injury. Now, so back injury, again, the response is muscle spasm, and muscle spasm will refer more rigidity, more back pain. And and here, if the muscles are weak, again, greater chances of back injury, which means that the back injury can, the chances increase if there's mental tension and therefore greater chance of accident. If the muscles are weak, greater chance of back injury. And if because of tension, there's muscle spasm, which makes the muscle rigid muscle more prone to tear and therefore more chance of back injury. So you can see that this is a complex network in which many things can contribute, and mental tension can be a very important factor in engineering this along with weak muscles. So the muscles are the source of the pain because its pain receptors are also located mostly in the muscles, and muscles are the site where the pain originates. Now, how does muscle spasm lead to pain and complicate the situation? Uh, this is a sort of a simple uh, physiological way of looking at it, that a muscle is in spasm, which means contracting. A muscle which is contracting needs more energy than the muscle which is relaxed. So a muscle in spasm has a higher energy consumption, but because of the contraction, strong contraction, it has squeezed the blood out of the blood vessels, and therefore blood cannot flow in easily, not much can, and blood cannot flow out easily. And the result is that it's on one hand, the energy consumption is high, but the supply of blood is low. And because the blood is not flowing out easily, whatever metabolites are being produced as a result of the contraction spends energy. Even if less blood is flowing, some energy is being consumed. Energy is being consumed through cycles which do not require oxygen. Those are generating the necessary energy. The result is accumulation of metabolites like lactic acid, and they lead to pain. So we find that spasm, in fact, is one of the central features, and therefore relaxation one of the central features of treatment of back pain. Injury leads to protective spasm. Spasm leads to a rigid spine, which can get injured more easily, and that leads to spasm. Mental stress also leads to spasm. So, spasm remains a very important factor. And of course, weak muscles are more prone to injury. So, weak muscles also remain important. How about the ligaments? Ligaments are glistening white band like structures, and they have again a very high tensile strength. They restrict the movement of joints to safe limits. They are they join one bone to the other and thereby uh, restrict the movement of joints to safe limits. They are stretchable, but only up to a point, and beyond that point, there can be an injury to the ligament, which can also be the cause of back pain. And it is because of the ligaments which can be injured that a person has back pain. The person is not to told not to go in for forward bends. You can do exercise in which you bend backwards but not forwards, because one can understand by common sense that if a person bends backwards, then the muscles at the ligaments at the back will be relaxed. If one bends forwards, those ligaments will get stretched. And if they get stretched beyond a point, the ligaments get injured. So it's to prevent injury to those ligaments of the back that forward bending is avoided if a person has back pain. Now, to the three types of structures which can get injured: bone, muscle, and ligament, which are the most difficult to heal and why? In fact, they take around the same time. The time is variable, depends upon the degree of injury, the type of injury. So the time is around 2 to 6 months uh, in all these structures. But in case of bone, the healing is more predictable. One knows in how much time what type of bone injury will heal, and it is more certain and it is more perfect. After the bone is healed, it is as good as new. In case of muscles, uh, it is not so predictable and it is not as perfect. In case of ligaments, it is the least predictable. The pain could become lifelong unless taken good care of. And the uh, end result is not perfect. The continuity may be restored. There is a ligament tear. The continuity may be restored, but it is not restored by the same type of material. It's restored by some type of a packing material, which is much weaker. So connective tissue, which is much weaker, loose connective tissue. Now that's what restores the continuity, but then it doesn't have the tensile strength of a ligament. And therefore, it's the slightest injury that can tear, and once again, the person has pain. And that's why this type of pain seem to have some sort of a memory. Once a ligament has been injured, it has healed. It has healed imperfectly, but the pain has gone because the continuity has been restored. But then next time, with the slightest carelessness, there's an injury, or sometimes even without a carelessness, just exposure to cold, there is a recurrence of the pain at the same place. So bone fractures take 2 to 5 months to heal, heal predictably and perfectly. Muscles take more than 2 months to heal. The time taken to heal is unpredictable and healing is imperfect. Ligaments and tendons. Tendons, are against like ligaments, but they are at the ends of muscles. So the similar structure, which is at the end of the muscles, which helps the muscle join to a bone, is the tendon. So ligaments and tendons take more than 2 months to heal. The time taken to heal is unpredictable and healing is highly imperfect. The reason for this variation is that the blood supply to bones is good, that to muscles not so good, and that to ligaments and tendons the poorest. So it's because of the blood supply, which is not so good in case of muscles and ligaments, that the healing is unpredictable and imperfect. Now, a person gets pain in the back suddenly. That is acute back pain. Acute refers generally to the suddenness, sometimes also to the severity. If the pain is severe, then again we call it acute. But uh, let's look at how a person can get severe back pain suddenly. That is acute back pain. What does it? What is it triggered by? It may be triggered by a major accident. That is understandable. But it can be also triggered by a minor accident. Now, what is a minor accident? Oh, I hardly did anything. I just bent down to pick up a pen, or I just reached a shelf to pick up a glass, and suddenly there was pain. I was having a bath, and uh, I don't think I made any abnormal movements or anything. Maybe just it might have twisted a little bit to pick up a bottle of shampoo, and then I had this sudden back pain. Now, so apparently nothing, a minor accident. Now that could lead to back pain. How that happens, why that happens, we'll see in a moment. And it may be even not even a minor accident. It may be just cold or mental stress. Now, all these things can precipitate acute back pain. Now, why that can happen is if the muscles are already weak. If the muscles are weak, then in a way, the preparation for this accident was going on for a long time. And therefore, it takes very little for this weak muscle to get injured or to go into a spasm and give us this pain. So it is like that, proverbial, the straw that broke the camel's back. The camel was getting overloaded. And finally, when it was almost sort of at breaking point, you just put one more straw and the camel's back breaks. That happens not because of the straw, but because of the already existing overload. So here there were already existing weakness of the muscles, maybe also spasm of the muscles because of mental stress. And both these things put together had prepared the background for that little accident, which led to acute back pain. Now, what is the treatment for acute back pain? Now, the treatment is firstly that one should lie down, take bed rest, and the uh, s- if the knees are bent, then one finds that one is comfortable. If one lies down on the back and bends the legs, what happens is that the spine becomes straight. The lumbar hollow is abolished. That hollow space under the back, that is gone, and the back becomes completely straight. The whole entire backbone is in contact with the bed, and that is much more comfortable. However, the person cannot keep the legs bent all the time, and therefore, to make it still easier, the legs can be bent without making any effort by putting a pillow under the knees. Now, turning to the side is permissible, is permitted, but without twisting the back, which means it has to be done very carefully. For a day or two at least, the person should have complete bed rest and should get up mainly for going to the toilet only. The duration of bed rest, the less the better, but at the same time, a few days may be necessary. And if it takes longer than 2 weeks, then it needs a thorough checkup because the cause may be more serious. It may not be just the ordinary back pain. Now, it may look paradoxical that even in acute back pain, some exercises are recommended. We'll not go into these details because these exercises you will see in the practical class day after tomorrow. The exercises for acute back pain, pressing the spine against the bed with the legs folded, folded leg lumbar stretch, that Pavan Muktasan with one leg at a time without lifting the head, uh, dorsal stretch, Ardha Naukasana, only the head and shoulders lifted, Shavasana with the legs folded. You see actual demo of it in the practical class day after tomorrow. Now, other aspects of treatment, uh, one can treat this compulsory bed rest as an opportunity for reflection, for having a relook at life. Is life going in the right direction? Does it require resetting the button to give it a new direction so that life becomes uh, more pleasant and more meaningful? One can do this just reflect lying down or have a little more structured reflection and introspection during meditation. Meditation can also be combined with visualization. After one has been meditating for 10 or 15 minutes, one can spend 5 minutes on visualizing the area which is in pain, the neck or the back. So one can visualize the painful area and have one's own visualization of how self healing mechanisms are restoring it back to health. And one can also, if one has so inclined, one can visualize a higher force, a guru, a god or a goddess, whatever you is in keeping with your faith, holding you, holding that painful area, touching that painful area, caressing that painful area lovingly, and that can further promote the recovery from the pain. One common question asked is whether any fermentation should be done, whether it should be cold, hot, and so on. As a rule of the thumb, if there has been an injury, uh, for the first 48 hours, cold fermentation will be good because injury means that there would be some bleeding going on inside where the place is injured in the muscles, etc. And to arrest that bleeding, cold fermentation is useful. By arresting bleeding, it reduces the pain as well as reduces the extent of injury. If more blood keeps accumulating, then more blood will have to be cleared, and therefore the injury is much more severe if with more bleeding. And therefore, if cold, by arresting this bleeding, can reduce this bleeding, uh, it helps. But that helps soon after the injury, up to a maximum of 48 hours. The sooner this cold the fermentation is done, the more effective it is. After more than 48 hours, hot fermentation seems better because that increases the blood flow. And increased blood flow promotes healing. So both have a logic, but as a rule of the thumb, Cold should be early, as soon after the injury as possible, preferably within 24 hours. And certainly after 48 hours, it will not be of much use. Hot fermentation should be done only after about 48 hours. Now, cold doesn't mean that one exposes oneself to cold continuously. Again, it has to be a brief period, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then leave it for an hour because too much of reduction in blood flow is also not good. And therefore, it has to be a brief period of application of cold, followed by an interval during which you are not applying neither heat nor cold, and then again a little cold for some time, and then again leave it for an hour without anything. Now, drugs, if necessary, one may use painkillers and muscle relaxants. To some extent, the painkiller itself relieves spasm because the spasm is further aggravated by the pain. And therefore, to break this vicious cycle of pain and spasm, a painkiller itself may be useful, but then to that one can add a muscle relaxant. Then, after recovery from the back pain, one should go in for exercise for chronic back pain, which we shall see soon, for a healthier back to prevent this acute pain from becoming chronic and for having a healthier back so that further future accidents which lead to a similar type of acute back pain become less likely. So this can be treated, one episode of acute back pain can be treated as an opportunity for acquiring better health in general and a healthier back in particular so that this type of acute back pain will be less likely in future and also this acute back pain will not go to chronic back pain. Now, the various causes of back pain, chronic back pain, that is back pain which just goes on for months and so on for months, not very severe, not incapacitating, but all the same, it is there. This can be if the bed rest during acute pain was unduly prolonged. That leads to weakness of the muscles. It's a price to be paid for the back rest, which was necessary for some time. But the longer the bed rest, the more the weakening of the muscles because the muscles are not being used, and that can lead to chronic back pain. Inadequate or inappropriate treatment of acute uh, pain. This inadequate is one word, it shouldn't be any space there. Inadequate or inappropriate treatment of acute pain. So if the acute pain was not treated enough for properly, it still had not healed completely, or it was treated inappropriately. That can lead to chronic back pain. Or if the acute attack was due to a ligament injury, and we saw ligament injuries are very difficult to heal and have a tendency to recur, that can again make the back pain chronic. The treatment of chronic back pain can be summed up in three E's, through three E's: exercise, ergonomics, education. When the person comes with chronic pain, the first thing the person expects is to be advised some exercise. But then, along with that, ergonomics, which means fitting a person to a device or a machine, is important. Here, machine doesn't mean any complex machinery. Here, it refers to the fitting the person properly to the chair on which he sits, the bed on which he sleeps, the pillow on which he rests his head, and so on and so forth. Now, for these to be proper, comes under ergonomics. And for uh, ergonomics, as well as for other aspects of taking good care of the back, education of the patient is important. And that is what we are doing through this session. But here we are following the opposite sequence. We're starting with education. We'll talk a bit about ergonomics. We'll talk very little about exercise. Some exercises we'll see day after tomorrow in the practical class. So, how can back pain be prevented? Prevention is better than cure. And what applies to prevention also applies to some extent to treatment of chronic back pain. Regular practice of yogic techniques, asanas, pranayamas, and meditation keeps the muscles not only strong, but even more important, flexible, and gives us the capacity to relax the muscles, which is extremely important. And therefore, in yogic practices, one should not neglect the warm up and relaxation. Neglecting the warm up could mean a sudden movement which leads to injury, and neglecting the relaxation would again mean that we do not develop the really important capacity to relax muscles, which is what is important. Spasm is just the opposite. Spasm is what we don't want. We want just the opposite of it, relaxation, and that is what we learn in yogic practices. And one should take a regular walk because walking uh, involves, to some extent, the working of all those muscles which are directly or indirectly connected to the back. And the walk should be conscious, as everything should be. One can, in fact, admire the marvel of nature that we are such a tall, erect structure, uh, able to walk so well, so fast, without stumbling. That itself is a marvel, which is possible as a result of the complex skeletal system and muscles and ligaments that we have. So, that conscious walk is important. Then the footwear should be comfortable while walking and even otherwise throughout the rest of the day. High heels are completely out. And then one should try to avoid accidents, which also becomes possible if one does everything consciously. Then the posture while standing, sitting, reading, driving, etc. Now, here you can see what the right posture in sitting should be. Uh, Firstly, I'm in the chair. The chair should have a place for the lumbar hollow so that the convexity of the back fits into the hollow or the concavity of the lower back. Now, in the first picture where, which is wrong, the wrong way of sitting, the chair is okay, but the person is not sitting properly. The person is not sitting with the back erect. It's in the second one that the person is sitting with the back erect so that that hollow is being properly used. And then how to sit at a desk and read. Now, the first one is wrong. The stool is too high. The student is bending, and the table is straight. In the second one, you find that the student is sitting on a proper seat with a lumbar hollow, and the difference in the height between the height of the chair, the seat of the chair, and the top of the desk is adequate. And then on the top of that, we have a sloping, surface on the desk. And the result is that the child does not have to bend the neck much to be able to read or write. So, wrong and right posture. Now, while driving, now the first one is right. And in that, you find that the person is not too far away from the steering wheel. And the person uh, has his legs slightly raised so that the entire thigh is not in contact with the seat. The second and the third are not right. In the second one, is bending forward, not really making good use of the whole thing. And the third one, he has taken the seat a little too far back so that his hands are absolutely stretched to be able to reach the steering wheel. So the seat should be brought a little closer to the steering wheel, as close as is comfortable, and the leg uh, should be a little raised. The thigh should be a little raised so that there's some space uh, at the two ends of the thigh between the seat and the thigh. Then, continuing with prevention of back pain, avoid long and frequent journeys by road. Journeys by road can be much more traumatic to the back than a journey by train or by air. So, avoid long and frequent journeys by the road. And if at all one has to, it's unavoidable, then one can use a lumbar support, a belt during the journey. Then the posture, and for the neck, one can use a collar. Then the posture during sleep. One should sleep either on the back or on the side, Generally, we keep changing the posture throughout the night, changing from one side to the other. But what one should not do is to sleep on the tummy. Should be either on the back or on the side, not on the tummy. Then lying down in the afternoon. This cannot be overemphasized. This is extremely important because if we are erect, the discs between the vertebrae keep getting compressed a little bit throughout the day. And therefore, if a person has been standing and walking, but not lying down, maybe sitting, but not lying down throughout the day, then one finds that the height measured in the evening is a little less than the height measured in the morning. That's because of the compression of these discs between the vertebrae. Now, the discs are not only getting compressed, it's also uh, a strain on the back as a whole, including the discs. So, what one can do is to lie down in the afternoon, maybe for just 15 minutes. One doesn't have to sleep, but lying down is important because what that does is to break a 16-hour day into two installments of 8 hours each. Normally, if a person does not lie down at all in the daytime, then it's just 8 hours of sleep and 16 hours of being awake. So it's 8 plus 16. 16 hours of compression and followed by 8 hours of decompression of the intervertebral discs, the discs between the vertebrae. If one lies down in the afternoon, then it is 8 plus 8 plus 8. So instead of 8 plus 16, it becomes 8 plus 8 plus 8, and that's a big difference. Then the type of mattress and the pillow that a person uses. The mattress should be neither hard nor too soft. It should be just firm. And a mattress with a quilted surface is better. Uh, and if the mattress is of the sandwich type, that is, it has layers of wire and very thin layers of foam alternating in such a way that it is not as hard as coir, but it has a little softness because of the foam. But the foam is not so much as to sort of become hollow at the place where the person lies down, so that it remains straight and firm. And then the quilted surface again helps because that does not sort of have, that provides a much greater comfort and fit than a smooth surface. So that type of a mattress is the best. And pillow, uh, the type of pillow one would need would be different depending upon whether one is lying down on the back or on the side. If one is lying down on the back, then it's just a thin and soft pillow is what is required. And this pillow should be placed in such a way that it fills up the hollow of the neck. And one can pull the two sides, that the ears of the pillow, as to say, forwards to bring them over the shoulders so that the pillow uh, occupies nicely and snugly the hollow behind the neck. So that's all what is required, a thin and soft pillow which is placed properly. If one sleeps on the side, then one finds that the hollow of the neck, which has to be accommodated, becomes much bigger because then, uh, since the head and the face is quite a long distance away from the shoulder, all that space has to be filled up in addition to the hollow of the neck. And therefore, then one what needs is a thicker pillow. And at the same time, it has to be firm enough to be able to hold this, to be maintain that space so that the neck doesn't have to bend. The neck still remains horizontal. Neck and the head remain horizontal in spite of sleeping on the side. They don't just sag down because of in the distance between the head and the shoulder. Now, this can be achieved in many ways. One of the simplest is to use an ordinary pillow, the thin and soft pillow which one can use while lying down on the back, but then have underneath it a folded carpet, a folded carpet which has been brought to the same size as a pillow. If you have that underneath, then you are getting the surface of, you're sleeping on the soft surface which can occupy any shape and take up the shape of the hollow of the neck, and at the same time, not yielding so much because of the firm surface provided by the carpet, folded carpet underneath. Then avoid putting on weight, because carrying even 1 kilo of weight continuously 24 hours a day, 365 days in a year, can be very tiring and stressful. So if one is 5 or 10 kilos overweight, you can imagine you are carrying those extra 5 or 10 kilo weight at 24/7, 365 days a year. And that is an additional weight that the back has to carry, that the hip joints and the knee joints have to carry. It's unkind to all these structures. Then avoid mental stress. We've already seen in a considerable detail how mental stress can be an important contributor to back pain. Then how can one, what is the best way to lift a heavy load? Uh, you can see the right and the wrong ways both. The right way is that try to make use of the muscles of the leg as much as possible, bend the back as little as possible. That is sort of the key, which means go as near the load as you can and bend down so that the legs are bent, and then lift up the weight, if necessary, support it on the thighs before getting up. So you can see two demonstrations, uh, one in which just sort of not to bend forwards, another one showing how to move from one step to the next, so that in steps the load is getting lifted up until it is actually being held when the person is erect and holding the load. And if the load is asymmetrical, then the heavier part of the load should be nearer the body, the lighter part away from the body. Now, for treatment of chronic back pain, one has to be a little more scrupulous, a little more particular about doing everything that was important for preventing back pain. When there's no back pain, one forgets and might sometimes take liberties. But if a person has chronic back pain, then the person should do all those things more scrupulously, more meticulously. And then regular yoga postures are building up slowly. So the person has chronic back pain, and therefore some postures will not be permissible, at least to start with. So the principle is to start with easy postures and go on adding more gradually. Uh, this person, Dr. Arthur Brownstein, who calls himself just Art Brownstein, uh, he's written a beautiful book, Healing Back Pain Naturally, which is based not just on his knowledge as a doctor, not just on his experience as a physician who deals with chronic pain, particularly chronic back pain, but on also personal experience. Because he himself underwent a back injury, and after trying many things, including surgery, during which a few of his vertebrae were thrown into the dustbin, as he says, by the surgeon, after going through all this, he finally found that his back pain did not go away. And then he came to Kavaladham in Lonavala to do a course on yoga and learn yoga. And he uh, went on to get a diploma in yoga education uh, and brought that into his treatment of back pain. It helped him. And then he was very passionate about passing it on to others. And that's how he became a back pain specialist and eventually a chronic pain specialist. Now, he has devised, following these general principles listed here, an 8-week program in which a person starts with some easy postures and slowly builds up more and more. And one goes slow, especially with forward bending postures. But then by week 5, even this person with chronic back pain can do at least an easy variation of Padahastasana, that is bending forwards acutely, trying to take the hands towards the toes. Prasarit means that the legs are at a distance. So spread the legs about a foot apart and then try to do Padahastasana. This the person can do by week 5. But the most important thing throughout this program is to listen to the body. To listen to the body. Your body tells you how much you can do and beyond which you should not go. Relaxation and stretching is emphasized much more than building up the strength of the muscles. And why? You can see here, and that the stretching and in contraction, the muscle just becomes fat and bulgy. But in stretching, the muscle becomes longer and more flexible. And the stretch, of course, has to be gentle. In yoga, the stretch is not like this, but like this. Yeah. Now, back pain, we can see, is actually a lifestyle disease. It is not just a problem of the back bones. It's not even a problem of just the muscles. It's the lifestyle as a whole. How do the muscles get weak? They get weak because of sedentary life, because of less physical activity. That's a part of the lifestyle. Then, what is it that makes us more vulnerable to back and neck pain? Sitting for too long in poorly designed seats. This is also a part of the lifestyle. Then, this person gets suddenly worked up. Oh, I've been too sedentary. I should go on a holiday and take some exercise. And he goes on a holiday with heavy luggage and indulges in unaccustomed activity. And the result is that instead of coming back healthier, he comes back with back pain. This is not the way to prevent back pain. Go on an occasional holiday, break your sedentary life with uh, a vacation every 6 months, during which you uh, come back with back pain. Now, the person has put on weight. That again is because of lifestyle, less physical activity, and eating too much of the wrong types of foods. Mental stress, again, closely associated with the lifestyle, and smoking. How smoking leads to this is by promoting atherosclerosis. And atherosclerosis is what? Deposition of fatty substances in the arteries. If it happens in the heart, the person gets coronary artery disease. But the same thing can happen also in the back arteries. And that's why when the just as the coronary arteries can go into a spasm, the arteries of the back can also go into a spasm. And this can be promoted by mental stress, a heavy high fat meal, smoking, drinking, cold, etc. The same type of factors which can precipitate spasm in the coronary arteries if there's a partial block. Here also there's a partial block. Superimposed on that may be the spasm of the arteries. I was talking about the arteries, not of the muscles. And that then blocks the blood supply to those muscles. And that's how the muscles fail and the person goes if or goes has back pain. So it is more or less like an heart attack, but we don't call it a back attack because it is not life threatening. So there is an acute spasm superimposed on a chronic reduction in blood flow to the muscles of the back, as in the case of the heart muscle. Same thing can be true also of the muscles of the back, and that can increase the risk for back pain. Now we come to neck pain. In fact, it's extremely similar. The cervical spine, that the spine in the neck, is also a part of the same spinal column, the same vertebral column, uh, and therefore the principles are very similar. The causes: weak muscles of the neck, spasm of the neck muscles, acute neck pain, and this acute can become chronic for similar reasons. And prevention, again, the same factors apply with greater attention to the neck region and the shoulders. So, what one can do for prevention of neck pain or treatment of chronic neck pain? For acute neck pain, we'll see the exercises again day after tomorrow in the practical class. More of loosening exercises of the neck, elbows, and the shoulders. More means more in number, and also spend more time on them, emphasize them more. Then caution is required while bending the head forwards and no neck rotation. So while doing these practices, exercises of the neck for warm up, one should, or for any other practice, avoid bending the head forwards and certainly no neck rotations. For similar reasons, just as we don't bend the body forwards for back pain, here the head is not bent forwards. Avoid Sarvangasana, Matsyasana, and Kapalabhati, which could create a strain on the neck. One common question that is raised is whether one should use lumbar support like a belt and a collar for the neck, use it or not. Now, the, the pros and cons of these are that by providing support, they do help the pain. They can also help prevent pain, say, in case of a road journey, which is very bumpy, avoiding undue strain. But at the same time, they make the use of the muscles unnecessary. And if the muscles are not used, they grow weak, which means that one should sit on a properly designed seat and use the back support of the chair, or if necessary, use an additional support all the time using a belt. Now, that support will help treat the pain, prevent the pain. Now, why that is important is that the posture may be right, but there is a limit to which one can maintain that support, and therefore it is necessary to maintain that posture for very long. Then a little support is helpful. So they are helpful. But at the same time, uh, if this artificial support is provided all the time, the muscles do not get a chance to work. And if the muscles don't work, they grow weak. And when they grow weak, there's an increased vulnerability to back and neck pain, which means that we have to find a compromise, a midway path. Go by the situation, judge by the situation, and listen to the body. So, as and when required, one can use the support, but only as long as it's necessary. One should not provide artificial lumbar support or even this lumbar support provided by a chair unduly long all the time. And that same thing applies to the headrest or the collar for the neck. These supports should be used with discretion to prevent injury, to prevent excessive use of these parts of the body, but at the same time, not so much as to lead to disuse atrophy of the muscles concerned. So that is sort of how one can look upon it. So they have this artificial supports have their use. They prevent injury, they provide rest, they relieve pain, uh, and they can make us sit in that posture much longer than it would be otherwise possible without discomfort. And same time, the negative side of these supports is that they weaken the muscles and increase the possible risk for pain. Ideal would be that one has a type of lifestyle in which these supports are not needed much, at least not the belt and the collar. One can use good chairs, that is fine. But then, even while sitting on this chair, best would be to sit without this support, erect as much as possible. And when one gets tired, instead of depending upon the support, get up and change the posture. Changing the posture every half to 1 hour, walking around a bit, is a good practice for preventing back and neck pain. And it also helps in taking better care of the eyes, because if one has been sitting in front of a computer or a screen, that also needs a break. So the break is both for the back and the neck, and the break is necessary also for the eyes. And therefore, best is to organize one's life in such a way that one is able to get that break, maybe for 5 minutes only, but every half to 1 hour. That would be ideal instead of depending upon any type of support for the back and the neck. One should be able to sit erect without any support, and one should sit erect without any support as far as possible, and just change the posture every half to 1 hour. Take a half 5 or 10 minute break, depend upon that rather than artificial support. So back pain and neck pain are problems which all of us have experienced sometime or the other. Just to be on the safe side, it's more than 80%. It would be almost 100% uh, of us have experienced. But the brighter side is that at any point in time, most of us do not have back pain. Suggested reading, Back to Health Through Yoga. Uh, and this is a long chapter, nearly 40 pages in this book. And still more comprehensive is this book by Arthur Brownstein, Healing Back Pain Naturally. You're all welcome to Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch. We love to hear from you. Any questions or comments, for which you can drop an email to yes@yesspirituality.com. Gratitude to the authors of these books, Principles of Anatomy and Physiology and Healing Back Pain Naturally, for pictures, as well as for all the knowledge that Art has shared with me personally and through this book. Gratitude to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo for making these sessions possible. Thank you all for being there.
Close today's session with a moment of silence. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.